Kit Carson Autobiography Part 3. We trapped on the waters of the Arkansas until the rivers began to freeze, and then went into winter quarters on the main stream. During the winter we passed a pleasant time. The snow was very deep, and we had no difficulty in procuring as much buffalo meat as we required. In January 1833, a party of men who had been out hunting returned about dark. Their horses were very poor, having been fed during the winter on cottonwood bark, and they turned them out to gather such nourishment as they could find. That night a party of about 50 Crow Indians came to our camp and stole 9 of the horses that were loose. In the morning we discovered sign of the Indians, and 12 of us took the trail and traveled about 40 miles. It was getting late. Our animals were fatigued, for the snow was deep, and the passing of many herds of buffaloes during the day caused us a great deal of difficulty in keeping the trail. At length we saw a grove of timber at a distance of 2 or 3 miles. Taking into consideration the condition of our animals, we concluded to make for it and camp for the night. On our arrival, however, we saw fires about 4 miles ahead of us. We tied our animals to trees, and as soon as it became dark, took a circuitous route for the Indian camp. We planned to come upon the Indians from the direction in which they were traveling. It took us some time to get close enough to the camp to discover their strength. As we crawled and used all the means that we were aware of to elude detection. After maneuvering in this direction for some time, we came within about 100 yards of their camp. The Indians were in 2 forts of about equal strength. They were dancing and singing and passing the night jovially in honor of their robbery of the whites. We spied our horses, which were tied near the entrance of one of the forts. Let come what would, we were bound to get 'em. We remained concealed in the brush, suffering severely from the cold, until the Indians lay down to sleep. When we thought they were all asleep, 6 of us crawled toward our animals, the rest remaining where they were as a reserve for us to fall back on in case we did not meet with success. We hid behind logs and crawled silently towards the fort, the snow being of great service to us, for when crawling we were not liable to make any noise. We finally reached the horses, cut the ropes, and by throwing snowballs at them drove them to where our reserve was stationed. We then held a council, taking the views of each in regard to what had best be done. Some were in favor of retiring, having recovered their property and received no damage. They were willing to return to camp. Not so with those that had lost no animals. They wanted satisfaction for the trouble and hardship they had gone through while in pursuit of the thieves. Myself and 2 others were the only ones that had not lost horses, and we were determined to have satisfaction, let the consequences be ever so fatal. The peace party could not get a convert to their side. Seeing us so determined to fight, there is always a brotherly affection existing among trappers, and the side of danger is always their choice. It was not long before all agreed to join us in our perilous enterprise. We started the horses that had been retaken to the place where we had tied our other animals, with 3 of our men acting as an escort. We then marched directly for the fort from which we had taken our horses. When we were within a few paces of it, a dog discovered us and began to bark. The Indians were alarmed and commenced to get up when we opened a deadly fire, each ball taking its victim. We killed nearly every Indian in the fort. The few that remained were wounded and made their escape to the other fort, whose inmates commenced firing on us, but without any effect, since we kept concealed behind trees, firing only when we were sure of our object. It was now near day, and the Indians could see our force, which was so weak they concluded to charge on us. We received them calmly, and when they got very close, fired on them, killing 5, and the balance returned to their fort. After some deliberation among themselves, they finally made another attempt, which met with greater success. we had to retreat, but there was much timber in the vicinity, and we had but little difficulty in making our camp, where, being reinforced by the 3 men with the horses, we awaited the approach of the enemy. Since they did not attack us, we started for our main camp and arrived there in the evening. During our pursuit of the lost animals, we suffered considerably, but in the success of recovering our horses and sending many a redskin to his long home, our sufferings were soon forgotten. We remained in our camp without any further molestation until spring, when we started for Laramie River on another trapping expedition. Before our departure, we cached what beaver we had on hand, some 400 pounds. When we arrived on the South Fork of the Platte, 2 of our men deserted, taking with them 3 of our best animals. We suspected their design, and Gaunt sent myself and another man in pursuit. They had a day the start, and we could not overtake them. When we arrived at our old camp, we discovered that they had raised the beaver and taken it down the Arkansas in a canoe, which we had made during the winter for the purpose of crossing the river. The men and the beaver we never heard of again. I presume they were killed by Indians, and they deserved such a fate for their dishonesty. We recovered the stolen animals and considered ourselves fortunate, as they were of much more service to us than men that we could never trust again. We took possession of one of the buildings that had been built during the winter and made the necessary preparations for our defense, not having the remotest idea how long we should have to remain. Being by ourselves, we never ventured very far from our fort, unless for the purpose of procuring meat. We kept our horses picketed near, and at night slept in the house, always keeping a good lookout so that we might not be surprised when unprepared. We were here about a month when Mr. Blackwell, Gaunt's partner, arrived from the States, accompanied by 10 or 15 men. Shortly after their arrival, 4 trappers of Gaunt's party arrived. They had been sent to find us and learn whether we were dead or alive, the former being the general belief. We remained only a few days after the arrival of the trappers. They stated that Gaunt's camp was in the Bahia Salado, the headwaters of the South Fork of the Platte. While we were eating breakfast on the 4th day of our march, we discovered a party of Indians trying to steal our horses. Suspecting no danger, we had turned them out to graze, some hobbled and some loose. As soon as we perceived the Indians, we made for them. 1 Indian was killed and the rest ran away. They stole only 1 horse from us, one of the Indians having been lucky enough to mount one of the loose horses and make his escape. We traveled about 50 miles that day and thought that we had got clear of the Indians. We camped on a beautiful stream, one of the tributaries of the Arkansas. During the night, we staked our best animals. We had a very watchful dog with us, and during the night, he kept barking continually. We were aware of the Indians being close and kept good watch. In the morning, myself and 3 others proposed to go to a fork of the river that we knew of. It was not far, and we wished to visit it to look for beaver sign. If they were good, we intended to trap the stream; if not, to proceed on our journey. About an hour after we left, a large party of Indians charged the camp, running off all the loose animals. 4 of our men immediately mounted 4 of the best animals and followed them. In a short time, they overtook the Indians and recaptured all the animals. One of the men was severely wounded in the affray, and 1 Indian was killed. End of part 3.